Okay, good morning, everybody. Is the voice clear? Voice and video?
Yes, sir. Good
Okay,
morning.
so let's get started. We were discussing about pipelining. We said that the processor that we had discussed is not used in present day. Maybe 30, 40 years back they were used, but now almost every processor is pipelined. And the pipelining, the main advantage is that is no hardware cost, but you get speed up. So who will leave that? So every processor is pipelined. And these exploit the parallelism present in a basic block. But what exactly is a basic block in a program? Can anybody answer this question? What is a basic block in a program? Yes, anyone would like to answer? Okay, so no one can answer. Yeah, Varun, would you like to answer? Varun?
Could we consider it as an operation in a processor?
No. The basic block in a program, I have given an example program. A basic block is a block of statements or a sequence of statements which has a single entry here and single exit. Every block has a single entry and single exit. So just see the C program, and this is the basic blocks present in the program. The main thing here in a basic block is that there is no jump outside or jump into this. No exit other than the entry and exit, and therefore these are pipelined very efficiently. So the pipeline affects the parallelism in a basic block very efficiently, because we know that if there is a jump and so on, the pipeline flow of instructions get disrupted. And if we have a large enough basic block, like straight line code, the pipeline can improve processor performance by up to n times. That is n stage pipeline. But unfortunately, that's not the case. We'll see that it's not really n times. It becomes less than that due to some problems. And you get n time improvement. Like you have a processor with 22 stage pipeline, you'll get 22 times improvement in performance, and does not require investment in hardware. So same hardware, you get improvement. Who will leave that? And therefore every processor is pipeline. And also another advantage is transparent to programmers. You don't have to put any extra effort to run in a pipeline processor. You just wrote the C program and it's running. But then a speed up of n is ideal. It's less than that actually, due to several problems. One is that it's very difficult to balance all the stages. If I have n stages, like 22 stages, some stages take more time, some are less time, and so on. And the delays due to registers, this is the pipeline overhead, the pipeline registers. We need to, at the end of every stage, need to write to the registers. The clock skew we were discussing last time. And most important, or the most prominent drag, is the hazards. The hazards were so bad that once it appeared that pipeline is unusable. It hardly gives any benefit. I think that's called as the Flynn's pessimism. Flynn once remarked, experimentally proved that using pipeline you can get speed up no more than 1.5. That was his pessimistic result. He said, whatever you do, the pipeline speed up cannot exceed 1.5. And he gave a proof for that. And the basis of the proof is that he found out what is the size of the basic block. He said every 4 statement or something, there is a, on the average, there is a jump if then else while etc. And therefore he proved that it is 1.5. But then later with research, his pessimism was proved to be wrong. So can anybody answer where he went wrong? His argument was that basic block size is 1.4 statements or 5 statements, and there has to be a flush of the pipeline at the end because there is a change in the sequence of instructions. So where did he go wrong?
So possibly because he took a constant for the basic size, basic block size. So it could be lesser or more than that.
He took average. Varun, he took average. So he just looked at large number of programs and he computed the average basic block size. Anybody else would like to answer? How did his pessimism was proved to be wrong? Because he had proved it. He had computed the basic blocks considering large number of programs, and then he had published a paper on that, and it was all proved to be wrong later on. Where did he go wrong? Anybody like to answer that question? It will be really nice if somebody answered. Okay, let me just give a brief answer to that. We'll see the answer as we proceed. The brief answer is that even though there is jumps, branches and so on, but they can be predicted almost with 100% accuracy. We have predictors. We look at some of the basic predictors. The very basic simplest predictor also gives more than 90% accuracy. And the processors use sophisticated predictors with nearing 100% accuracy. So all that thing that he assumed that basic block size is 4, etc. is gone because we are able to predict the next instruction. Anyway, so let's proceed. So the biggest problem in pipeline performance are the hazards. These are the worst drag on the performance of a pipeline unless we do something to address this. And fortunately, it turned out as days passed that all hazards can be handled very efficiently. And therefore, nowadays we are using pipeline. If the hazards could not have been handled, we won't be using the pipeline in the processor. Now let's first discuss what is a pipeline hazard. This is a very popular question. Wherever you go, if you say that you have done architecture, etc., they will say that pipeline is used in almost every processor. So can you tell what is a pipeline hazard? A pipeline hazard is a situation that requires preventing instruction from executing during its designated clock cycle. So what it means that we must have a mechanism in place which will prevent certain instructions from executing. It will delay those instructions a little bit, because if it did not delay, the result will be wrong. The result produced will be wrong. So the pipeline hazard, this is a very general definition, and you know general definitions are all encompassing and doesn't look very attractive, but then it is a situation requires preventing an instruction from executing during its designated clock cycle. But what are the different types of hazards? There are 3 types of hazards, because this is the next question they will ask you, that what do you mean by hazard and what are the different types of hazards? Okay, there are 3 types of hazards: structural hazard, data hazard, and control hazard. Let's look at these 3 types of hazard. And then the next question they will ask, what are these hazards? Can you give example of these? And then if you are able to answer that, they will say that how are these addressed? Structural hazard is resource conflict. So 2 instructions need the same resource. since two instructions needing to use the same resource and a resource can be used by one instruction at a time, a easy solution is to duplicate the resources, but of course it has cost implications that if we duplicate the resource and maybe it will complicate the solution execution and so on. Now, one example of structural hazard is that we need ALU to perform an arithmetic operation, but at the same time, another instruction needs the ALU to increment the PC, or let's say to compute the branch address. So we had seen that we had replicated the ALU. We did not use the same ALU. So this is to overcome the structural hazard. And also another example is that the cache. For each instruction execution, we need to fetch the instruction. And for some instructions, namely the load store instruction, we need to also store or read some data. And therefore, in some cycles, we need to both fetch and also store or read data from the cache, and we can do both of them at the same time. At a time, the cache can process only one request. And that is the reason every processor has different instruction cache and data cache nowadays. This is an important observation here that all pipelined processor that you see now have different instruction cache and data cache. The laptop you purchased or the desktop that you use, if you look at the specification of that, you will see the size of the data cache and the instruction cache, and you will see that there are two different caches. So look at here. If we have a single cache like this, in some cycles it will get two requests at the same time. One is that instruction fetch of one instruction, and another instruction is trying to do read or write. So this is a load store type of instruction. And three instructions down here is an instruction which is trying to do instruction fetch at the same time that the first instruction is trying to read or write into the cache. And this is a situation of structural hazard. And if we have two different caches, one for instruction fetch and the other for the data, the structural hazard can be addressed. But what about, okay, so this is about the cache, this diagram. So the load word is needing to access the cache, and three instructions down here is trying to do instruction fetch, and both at the same cycle here, same clock cycle. Two operations on the cache cannot be performed on the same cycle, and therefore it's a structural hazard. Easiest solution is that we replicate the resource into two, like instruction cache, data cache. But if we are not able to do that, we'll have to delay the third instruction. But what about the structural hazard due to register access? Because some instruction may need its operands from the register, and another instruction may write the result into the register. So this we were trying to discuss sometime earlier actually, and some of you had given answer that we use half the cycle to write here and half the cycle to read here. So here we read in the second half and write in the first half. But can we do the other thing, that we write in the first half and read in the second half? Can we do that? So can anybody answer? Can we do that?
So then the value would be changed for the operation that would be trying to access the value from the register.
Okay. So there will still be a hazard, because by the time it reads, the value has not been updated. So it will read the old value. So the hazard has not gone. If we do the read fast and write later does not help much, it still results in a hazard. So we should have write fast as shown in this diagram, doing the write in the first half of the cycle and read in the second half of the cycle. And then only it is able to read the data that was updated by the instruction here, the correct data. But many times we cannot really do much. I mean, there are techniques that we'll discuss later, but some time back, we didn't know those techniques, maybe 20, 30 years back. So what they used to do is have a hardware circuit which will insert a no-op. Every instruction set architecture has a special instruction called as no-op, NOP. In MIPS, it is NOP. It is all zeros basically. NOP is all zero. The instruction is all zeros. And if you try to interpret what it is in the case of a MIPS, that all the operands, all the bits are zeros. If you interpret the opcode and the registers and so on, you'll see that it says shift left, register R0 and store into register R0 or something like that. So it doesn't mean much, but then it is means as long as the processor sees all zeros, it knows that it is no op. And as the hazard is detected by the processor, it has a circuit which will input this no op. Instruction fetch will be stalled. Next instruction will not be input to the processor. The no op will be inserted. This specific instruction will be given, and the result is that for this instruction, it basically idles all the stages one after other. They idle, and therefore the next instruction is delayed basically by one clock cycle. If we represent in a table format, it is represented like this. We write here stall for I plus 3. And then the instruction comes here. The I plus 3, the initial part, the cycle in which it was supposed to execute is a stall, which is basically a no op, and then the instruction fetch starts in the next cycle. So this is the alternate representation. Now let's try to identify or compute how much the performance will be degraded due to stalls. If we give a general expression, if the initially without stall, like we have a basic block long enough, thousands of instructions, then the CPI, the cycle per instruction is 1, or every second, every clock cycle, 1 instruction completes. But then we have these stall cycles per instruction. So we have to add that to get the pipeline CPI. So 1 plus pipeline stall cycles per instruction. And of course, we have assumed the ideal CPI to be 1, but then it may not be 1 due to other reasons. For example, unbalanced pipeline, pipeline register delay, and so on. So in this ideal case, the speed up will be CPI on pipeline, which is 1 divided by 1 plus pipeline stall cycles per instruction. So we can alternately write here the speed up is the pipeline depth, like you have a 22 stage pipeline, it will 22 by 1 plus pipeline stall cycles per instruction, which is for an ideal pipeline where there is no other pipeline overheads like register delays, unbalanced stages, and so on. Now let's do one numerical example. We assume we have a pipeline processor and the ideal CPI is 1, that is we are ignoring all overheads, they are negligible. And the cycle time is 1 nanosecond, that is it has a 1 gigahertz clock. Now the program that we are executing has 40% of the instructions do load store. And the others are other types of instructions. Now we have 2 cases, and also we assume that there are no other hazards like due to branches and so on. Those hazards are not present. Structural hazards are not present. Sorry, it's only the structural hazards present. Data hazards are not present. Control hazards are not present. So we consider 2 cases. One is a unified cache where there will be a structural hazard and a separate cache. So how much performance improvement is obtained by using separate data and instruction cache? So that's the numerical. Now, how do we go about doing this? Okay, we know the ideal CPI is 1, we have been given, and we have to compute what is the CPI with the hazard. And 40% of the instruction need 1 cycle stall. So that is on the average 0.4 cycle. So we have, if we recognize that much, then the answer is that for a unified cache, it is 1.4 cycles. When we separate cache, it is 1 cycle. So the speed up is 1 by 1.4 is 0.7. So we gain a 30% performance improvement. Now let's look at the data hazard. The structural hazards were rather straightforward. We needed to just replicate the resources or have a stall. Now let's look at the data hazards. These are more tricky than structural hazards. The data hazard is caused because one instruction depends on the result of a previous instruction. And the previous instruction takes many cycles to complete actually. Because it may be, if it is a 20-stage pipeline, it will take 20 cycles to complete. And if the next instruction needs the result from this, then this instruction has a data hazard. If it just proceeds its execution, it will use the old data. We need to somehow address this. Either we need to stall this instruction for some time, some clock cycles, or do something. But then the question is that we saw that a data dependence causes a data hazard, but every data dependence present in a program, does it result in a hazard? Can anyone answer this question? Other than Varun, we are getting, I think today all the answers we got from Varun. Anyone else would like to answer this question? That does all the data dependencies that we can identify in a program result in a hazard?
Not they are arranged in a specific manner. For example,
Ambuj, yes, Ambuj, please. What is your answer?
Sir, only in the situation when the second operation is trying to access the register before it is written back. Only in those cases.
Okay, correct. So here, if the instructions are wide apart, Like one instruction is 100 instructions away and there is a dependence, there is no problem. The result would have been updated. As Zambud said, the result would have been updated. So if they are wide apart, the data dependence existence does not result in a hazard. So let's look at an example of a data hazard. So the first instruction is adding R2, R3, producing result in R1. And the second instruction is trying to use the result produced in R1. Now, the first instruction updates the register in WB stage, which is the 5th stage here. But the second instruction needs it in the instruction decode stage. So at the instruction decode stage, if it tries to read the register, it's not yet been updated and it will get the old data. So this is a data hazard. So let's look at diagrammatically here. If there is the second, see here, the first one is producing the result in register 1 and all other instructions are using that result in register 1. And the OR instruction and XOR instruction, they have no problem because you had said that register is updated in the first half of the cycle and reading in the second half of the cycle. So these two will have no problem. There is no hazard here. But I have shown this in a pink line here because I just managed to escape the hazard because of this doing write in the first half and read in the second half. If we didn't do, this would also have resulted in a hazard. So we have, by the manipulation I had done by writing in the first half and reading in the second half, we have overcome the hazard. But these two instructions are not. They have got caught in the hazard. So they require result even before the result is produced. So time has to travel backward to keep them the result, but which is not the case. And so they will use the old data. So these two have the hazard. Similarly, loads also can cause hazard because we know that the data memory is accessed, but the registers are updated in the last cycle. And here, the load word is occurring in register 1 and the other instructions are actually using that data which was loaded. And the OR and XOR again have no problem, but the two other instructions have similar problem like add, etc. So load word is also causing similar problem. One way to fix the hazard is that we stall. Two consecutive cycle, we just inject no ops or the stalls. So there is no instruction and the sub has got delayed by 2 cycles. And now it can get the correct result. So you can do this in hardware. Actually, sometime they were doing this actually, that they were doing this delaying simple circuit, identify a hazard condition and input no ops. Quite some time back, maybe 20-30 years back, this is actually done, that they used to input no ops and delay. But then later, maybe about 25 or 20 years back, they said, can we forward? Now let's look at the idea behind forward. Okay, so today we'll have a quiz as announced, and it will be 20 minutes. So we need to stop here. Are you able to see your marks? I'm sure that for every quiz you are able to see your mark. But then overall the copy of mark that we have and your idea of the marks that you have got, they should match. Normally they should match actually, but still I think Taisi, are you there? Taisi?
Yes, sir. The
Okay.
quiz is ready.
So let us just all the quizzes that we have conducted, including this one. So this will be the 8th quiz. And the second quiz, we had some difficulty actually. The second quiz, somehow the question form was there in the file, somehow some mistake on our side. So maybe we'll have to cancel that quiz 2. Okay, anyway, let's for the time being, let all the marks be there. So all the 8 quizzes, Taisi, if you can upload after you correct the 8th quiz, let them verify. Normally it should match for everybody. And by chance, if there is a small error in entry or something, that will address. So Taisi, shall we start the quiz now?
Sure, I will.
Okay,
I
you are
can
ready.
start.
Okay, okay, great. So we'll stop the class here. Please attend the quiz. We'll continue on Monday.